All right. Hello and welcome to our retrospective on retrospective on the Star Wars franchise. And for this review, we're going to be talking about Attack of the Clones. And so I first want to get our general thoughts on Attack of the Clones out there. So what are your thoughts, Michael?
This one sucks. I probably like 4 out of 10. I don't like it. I don't have a good. Whenever I watch all the movies, I don't enjoy myself watching this. It's too long. It sucks. I think nothing redeems it. Like episode one, you have good stuff like the mall fight, pod racing, other general stuff. This one, no, I don't like it.
What are your thoughts, Justin?
So this is definitely my least favorite Star Wars film.
I meant to say that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's rough. It's rough, and unlike Phantom Menace, it doesn't grow on you, like Michael was saying.
I think it's
Uh,
gotten worse for me.
yeah, it's really rough to watch, and I do think that a lot of it is terrible. However, I do think there are a couple redeeming things about it. Unlike Michael, but
Yeah.
I do think there's a couple things I really enjoyed. Because they introduced the clones, and the clones are really cool.
Yeah.
The whole battle on Geonosis is pretty cool. I enjoy the character of Dooku, so
Yeah.
he's one of my more liked characters.
Yeah.
And then Jango Fett and Boba, his son, little Boba, that was pretty cool.
Honestly, I like this movie's contribution to the entire, the extended lore of the franchise because, I mean, without this film, I mean, a lot of people say this is possibly the beginning of the important stories in Star Wars. Because Phantom Menace, while it does set up certain arcs and certain storylines, it ultimately isn't that necessary to the entire what happens in the rest of the films. It's more like this one starts off with the Clone Wars, so we're in the thick of things, and we're
Yeah.
kind of getting an idea of what's going on on a broad scale with the politics, and then the whole how the Republic ends up falling into darkness.
I definitely see the importance of this film story wise. It's just the execution is really what gets me.
Yeah.
A lot of this film is just whining Anakin. Like Anakin is whining so much in this film,
The entire
and the whole dynamic between him and Padme and that whole love.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for me. It really
Nope.
doesn't.
Nope.
It's just there's no like. It's creepy. Honestly, that's how I describe it. It's
His
really
face.
creepy.
The faces he makes.
I don't know how by the end of the movie Padme is like, I'm in love with you. But man, it is just rough to watch. And that's really the one thing that really hurts the movie for me, like a lot. And it makes me have a hard time rewatching it. Other than that, other than the whole Anakin Padme scenes, I like the clones. I like the whole Camino. Everything on Camino was great. Most of Geonosis was pretty cool. The whole battle at the end with all the Jedi, and then the clones coming in with Yoda saving them and all that stuff. That's awesome. It's just like you said, it's long, and unfortunately, the longest parts are those love scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're trying to build the whole relationship between Anakin and Padme.
Yeah, like their couples retreat.
Yeah,
that
it's
that whole
rough.
thing.
It's rough. If I were to give this movie a score, right? We should probably talk about scores, personal scores. I'd give it a 6. Maybe,
A 6?
maybe lower. I don't know. I'd say a 6. I'd give it a 6. Benefit of the doubt, because it's Star Wars and I love Star Wars. But I gave the last film a 7. I'm giving this a 6. And I don't think anything is lower than that on all the films. I don't think any film is lower than that. That's my opinion, though. What about you guys?
Honestly, I give this a 7 because I know that's not a popular opinion, but there's a lot of aspects I like about this movie, and I think one of them has to be Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi. I think he actually comes into his own in this movie a lot better than the first one. Because in the first one, he's just a Padawan, but now we're getting to see him as a master. You know,
Mm. Yeah.
um, the obviously one of the things that brings it down is Hayden Christensen's acting, and then the dialogue is awful throughout the whole movie. But
I think it's more dialogue. I
I
think
mean,
he's fine.
it's like I relate to Hayden Christensen's character because I don't like sand either. I mean, as you know, I wear shoes when I go to the beach. I can't stand sand.
Yeah.
Really? I think that makes it worse because then it gets trapped.
Yeah, it's trapped in you. Now you get
Yeah.
that coarse, rough,
Yeah, I
and
think it's the
irritating
sand.
feeling.
I think it's the sandals.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not a big fan of sandals.
Yeah. No, that's fair. You make some fair points. What about you, Michael? What do you think?
So I agree with something he said. Obi-Wan. I say his hair, solid 9 out of 10. Okay. The movie, it's really low. It's like a 4 or 5. It's an F. I
Yeah.
don't like it.
Yeah.
Like Dooku, he's a good character. The clones, they don't really show up till the end.
Yeah,
And the
that's
best
fair.
part about the clones is in the Clone Wars TV show.
Mhm.
Here, they just kind of show up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The stuff on Camino is kind of interesting. It's cool. The fight between Dooku and I just hate it, especially once it's Anakin and Dooku, and it's just kind of, their face, and it's like shoo 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 shoo.
yeah,
Yeah. That's the one.
That's what I mean. Like it doesn't redeem. If that fight was cool, maybe it could.
Yeah.
Seeing
Yeah.
Yoda kind of, do his thing, that's a little cool. But
Mhm.
Maybe I should explain myself as to why I gave it a 7. So I'm thinking of my rating more as like a grade, as in like a C. So I think this movie is like a C minus kind of movie. Um,
Yeah.
I think the dialogue. I mean, if you ask my objective opinion, like if I'm talking on a broader scale, like everyone's consensus, I think this movie is probably a D minus.
Yeah.
But from my own subjective view, I think it's a C minus. But that's just
fair. I mean,
because
that's fair. I still stand on my 6 though. That's all I'm gonna say.
yeah,
about
it's
that.
for me out of not just the Skywalker movies, like
But
every movie, it's bottom for me.
yeah, I mean, everyone's entitled to their opinion. I'm sure there's people who love this movie. It's rough. It's rough.
I
for
saw
me.
I saw somebody on Twitter today. They ranked it with Empire. It was that like tier list people make.
yeah,
It
Yeah.
was on
What,
not
S
the
or
highest
A?
one. No, it was on
A?
A.
A?
A with Empire.
I mean,
Which they can say that, but
whatever. It's
Yeah.
not where I'd put it. It'd be the bottom. I don't know what's the bottom, F or E or something. I don't know.
I think it might be E.
Yeah, that would be.
E erase this from everything. Just get it
Yeah.
away.
one
But,
thing I
no,
like
that's
is
fair,
that
though.
I like that George Lucas in this movie, he stays true to his roots of bringing in like horror actors into his movies because, as you
Yeah,
guys
Dooku's great.
I don't know whether you guys know this, but in the original films, he brought in David Prowse and Peter Cushing, and they were
Yeah.
both from a lot of Hammer movies, which was
Yeah.
a horror studio back in the day.
Mhm.
And so Peter Cushing played Van Helsing and Victor Frankenstein in those old movies, and David
Yeah.
Prowse played the monster, and he played the monster in Frankenstein, just the later film. But George Lucas was a big fan of those movies, so one of the actors he actually wanted to get into, I think it was the second film, Strikes Back. I think he wanted to get Christopher Lee in the film somehow, but there was
Yeah.
conflicts in schedule, so that wasn't going to happen.
Makes
so
sense. I mean, he
brings him
eventually
into
got
this
him.
one, so that revitalized Christopher Lee's career.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I mean, Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, weren't they friends too?
Yeah, I think so.
They were good colleagues. One thing that I really like about that, on your point, is the whole aspect of the homage to Count Dracula with his character
Yeah.
calling him Count Dooku,
Mhm.
which is pretty cool. They missed the mark though on this character because my big thing is there was not enough story with him. They're like, okay, he's a fallen Jedi. Well, how did he turn to the dark side? That's where all the expanded lore, they've explained that now, but they missed
Yeah.
that really bad in this film. And you're kind of confused. It confuses the audience.
Yeah.
He's just this
Mhm.
Jedi who turned bad. And I think
He wasn't in the first movie at all, too. So like, you don't even.
exactly. It's brand new.
Yeah.
The thing is, there's actually deleted scenes for this film, and some of them still cringy, but some of them actually fill in a lot of plot holes with that character. There's a whole scene with Obi-Wan in the Jedi archives with Jocasta Nu, the librarian, and she's explaining Dooku. She also like
Mhm.
says this cringy thing how she has a crush on him or whatever, but how beautiful he is or whatever. But it explains a little
Oh.
more about like his character. And there's like they're looking at this statue of his head. That's how like pivotal he was as a Jedi. Like he was a very important Jedi. They explain that more in expanded stuff.
Mhm.
The whole curve behind his blade. He's a very interesting character, and they just missed the mark in this film. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they don't explain him enough, and that's one of the weak points that I see with it. Besides the whole Anakin Padme cringe fest.
Yeah.
But
I really, and to your point, I feel like the extended lore and plus the TV show Clone Wars, and even the animated movie, the two animated movies that they made, I felt like they fleshed out his character so much better in those things than they did in this movie. And
Mhm.
another thing, this is unrelated to Count Dooku, but I wanted to move on to Jango Fett in the movie. And Star Wars keeps to the tradition of killing off characters in the most unceremonious fashion as possible. Because just like Boba Fett in the original film, or in the original
Boba Fett.
trilogy, I should say, they die in the most unceremonious way. Like,
oh yeah, oh yeah,
the,
and it's a shame too. The same film he was introduced in, he was killed. Similar to Maul, similar to Grievous. It's a shame because these characters are really cool,
Mhm.
and it gives at least Boba Fett was in 2 films, but then again, he didn't have a lot of screen time. That's a lot of issues with some of these villains. They just don't have a
Yeah.
lot of screen time.
yeah.
Even Dooku. Dooku's like a main villain, bro. He barely
And he
has.
doesn't. He
He
doesn't
barely
show up
had.
till. Yeah.
Yeah, he barely has screen time. He's in, I think, the halfway point of episode 2, around there. Not until Geonosis, not until Obi-Wan
Yeah.
goes on
Like
to
Lance.
gets to
Yeah.
Geonosis, right?
Yeah.
And
I can't
then
remember. Do they
in
talk about him before that?
they do. They mention his
They do.
name.
Okay.
Um, and then he's in Revenge of the Sith all but 10 minutes. You know what I mean? It's just a waste of a character. It's a shame. I think the only waste of even more waste of a character would be, we'll get there when we get there, but Captain Phasma.
Phasma. Yep.
Yeah.
But
I was kind of
Dooku,
half
man,
expecting her to
Dooku's
show up again too
badass.
Yeah.
I was too.
in 9.
But Dooku is badass, dude, and I think they wasted the talent because Christopher Lee is a great actor,
Yeah.
and they could have utilized him a lot more than they did.
Didn't he have an apprentice in the? I
Yeah.
think it was one of the
Ventress.
animated films. They talked about his apprentice, right?
They talk about
Yeah.
it in episode 2, Qui-Gon.
Qui-Gon.
Yeah,
Oh no,
he
he's
was.
talking about Dooku's apprentice.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
one with the
Qui-Gon.
bald head. She had white skin and everything.
No, he's talking about Ventress.
Oh, you're talking about his Sith apprentice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's Clone Wars. Yeah, she was his apprentice, and that's what I liked about Clone Wars. They fleshed out, like you said, they fleshed out his character.
Mhm.
But even more, they could have gone more in depth with the fact when he was a Jedi,
Yeah.
Qui-Gon was his apprentice.
So he could have that connection with Obi-Wan.
Yeah, so he had that connection, which was awesome, which was cool. And also, they needed to flesh out more of Yoda. They did a little bit with that fight at the end, Yoda and Dooku, because Yoda took Dooku as his apprentice. And that was a really big deal because he was the Grandmaster. He's not supposed to have, a specific apprentice. He's supposed to be a general teacher, but he took Dooku because, well, one, he was worried about Dooku turning to the dark side. But that's expanded stuff. We can get into all that lore, but it's really interesting, because that whole dynamic, that shows how awesome of a Jedi he was. And then for him to turn Sith, the fallen Jedi, it's kind of like foreshadowing
I do kind of like how
Anakin.
he kind of pretends to not truly be evil. Like, Palpatine,
Yeah,
he never. Well, I guess he kind of does hide it. But like, I don't know, just the way he presents himself. He's like, "Oh my, they've made a terrible mistake." It's like, he's evil, but like, I don't know. I kind of like how he kind of portrays himself not
yeah,
to be completely evil.
yeah. He's got this sort of
He's like, "Come on, we'll destroy the Sith together."
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He's got this agenda.
Yeah,
One of the additions to this movie is rather than Yoda being a puppet like he was in the last film, which a lot of people love. They love that. A lot of people love puppet Yoda, and
I like
myself
Puppet Yoda, but
included.
not Episode 1 Puppet Yoda.
Yeah, I liked the
Yeah, that was
original
kind of an
trilogy
ugly
Puppet
puppet.
Yoda.
Like I
It
Yeah,
know a
was
lot of
an ugly
people love
puppet.
the puppet thing, but that's because of the original trilogy. And then when they made the Phantom Menace, they used a different model, and
yeah.
it
They had
just
to.
It
Yeah, it was
didn't work.
rough. They had to make him look younger though. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
yeah. And I think for what they wanted to do in this movie, he had to be CGI. And
Oh yeah, they couldn't
Well,
do
definitely,
practical
yeah.
effects. You see him jumping up on walls and stuff. Like, what are they gonna do with that with a
Hopping
puppet?
around.
yeah,
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
and honestly, I think the CGI in Attack of the Clones is so much better than Phantom Menace. Like I was rewatching it yesterday, the Blu-ray copy,
Yeah,
and it just wasn't that it holds up a little bit, but there are scenes where it looks really bad. Like there's a scene where in Phantom Menace where Jar Jar jumps into the lake, remember, and
yeah,
the water looks awful. Like not like when they're actually swimming, but when they jump in,
yeah,
it looks fake, you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think that is one of the few good things about this film is the CGI. And like we said before, this was cutting edge stuff, and it holds up today. It's pretty impressive. Like I'm not gonna lie, it's very impressive for the time. This was 2002, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2002. So I mean, it's pretty impressive for 2002, and it holds up pretty well.
And I
yeah.
can't remember the first time I saw this movie.
I
It
saw,
made little.
yeah,
I can't remember.
yeah, I saw this one in theaters.
Yeah,
But yeah,
as I said, this was the first one I saw in theaters. So after that, I went back and I don't know if it was before or a day after I saw the movie, but I know I saw Phantom Menace at some point. I just don't know whether I saw it before or after.
yeah,
That's a tough part. But one thing I want to get to about this movie is how Padme in this film takes a backseat. Like she's no longer a queen in this one. She's actually a senator now.
mhm,
And in later films, it gets to this point where maybe we shouldn't talk about it until Revenge of the Sith. But she says that line, this is where democracy goes to die, or this is where it dies.
Yeah.
But I can't remember. Is that in this one or is that in the next
that
one?
No, that's the next
that's
one.
the next one. Yeah, this is how
Yeah.
democracy ends.
But I mean, this one does lay the groundwork for when the Republic is going to fall.
Right. Yeah. There's
Well,
that
yeah,
whole
like
there's that whole duality they have. They explained it. I think it's one of the more redeeming aspects of the whole Padme and Anakin thing. It shows how
oh yeah.
different they are when they're talking about politics.
Hmm.
The whole scene where they're in the flower bed talking about the Senate and how Anakin's view on how he'd run it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Aggressive negotiations, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's one of the interesting aspects, and it kind of shows Padme's arc ever since Phantom Menace. Her character is just, in my opinion, becomes less of this badass and more of this like worried, housewife kind of thing, which I don't like at all.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
And then her falling in love with Anakin, in my opinion, makes absolutely no sense.
It
He's
doesn't.
like
Yeah,
a
they
freak.
don't have any chemistry on screen at all.
It doesn't
Like-
make sense to me. And
And also
honestly,
there's a bit of, I don't know, the age gap.
Oh yeah,
It's not big in this movie
yeah,
but when you compare it to the last movie, he's like 10, she's
yeah,
like 18.
yeah,
So it's like, how old is she? It's weird. It doesn't really matter at the end because
yeah. No,
Maybe
this
I
is
don't
she
know. It's
like,
just
waited. She waited until he came of age, I think, maybe. I mean, you don't
yeah,
know
it's
whether they
just
have any limits on who can date who in this universe, you know?
that is true, but it's still, I don't know. He
I
comes
don't know.
on
It
way
just
too
comes from a big
strong,
yeah.
and she's just like, at first she's like, no, and then by the end she's like, I love you. You know what I
Yeah, she
mean?
tells him at the very beginning, like, stop, you're a creep. Like, stop. Don't look at me like that. But then
Exactly.
it yeah.
It's just weird, and it kind of ruins the film for me because it's less Star Wars and it's more like this
Yeah.
weird,
Uh,
this weird
But
love.
we were talking about the music. They're like love music. It's good.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
probably the only good thing
Another
about
thing,
their
The music hits
romance.
the mark all the
Yeah.
time.
the
That's
music
like,
is always good.
that's like always a constant with Star Wars. I feel like.
Hmm. Yeah, another thing that I like about this movie is that it introduced. I don't know whether he was in the last movie, but they didn't show him all that much, and that's Kit Fisto. Like I've always loved Kit
Kit Fisto.
Fisto, and
Yeah,
they don't
He
show
do-
him a lot.
oh,
he's a cool character. He looks great.
Like in the animated movie that they did for the
yeah.
Clone Wars, like they did a whole scene, a whole sequence in that with him
Yeah,
on his home
underwater.
planet, and it was amazing.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
Another thing that I like about this movie is I feel like it forwards the character of Mace Windu a little bit. I think that they held back on him in the last movie. Like they said, I saw a lot of reviews saying that his character was boring in the last movie and everything. And I do see that a little bit, like he was a little boring,
I
but
can't really remember him much in
There's,
the first
that's
movie.
because he was
there's,
originally written to be stoic, you know? Like he wasn't
yeah,
written to be like a cool guy got like he usually is in Pulp Fiction or any of those movies.
and to be fair, it stays. You know, he stays pretty stoic throughout the whole thing.
Hmm.
The thing is that there wasn't much for him to do. You know, the
Yep.
story wasn't based on the Jedi at this point. It was more like just the Qui-Gon, and, Anakin, and Obi-Wan kind of thing. There just wasn't much for him to do. In this film, however, you know, he had, you know, a little more action, a little more screen time. This is the first time we see that purple lightsaber.
Hmm.
I
Um,
approve of that too.
it's baller.
Oh yeah.
Honestly, and it's pretty great how he
We'll
got
get
it.
to the yellow one later, but purple I approve.
Yeah, and you know he gets some screen time, some action. Jango Fett dies to his hand,
Oh yeah.
which is pretty interesting. And can we talk about that purple lightsaber? Because I think it's pretty
Sure.
great
Yeah.
how he asked George Lucas, "Hey, can I get this?" And at first, George Lucas was like,
Yeah, he's like,
"Absolutely not."
that's not how
But
it
by the
works.
time it came out, he's like, "You know what? Just let him have it."
Yeah.
And it really expanded the whole, you know,
Yeah.
lightsaber color idea. And I think it's really pivotal. That decision there is really pivotal to the whole lore behind lightsaber
Yeah, it
colors.
opened it up a
Yeah.
lot.
I think a lot of people make fun of the behind the scenes aspect of when they do
Well,
the
yeah, I
fight
was gonna say
sequences. Like there's that whole thing on YouTube of them doing like when they're
I was
doing
gonna
that
bring
big
that
fight
up.
in Geonosis.
When Justin was talking about the Geonosis fight and how it's cool, I can only think about the behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Them
mean
just all standing there like
it's all what
that's
blue screen or green
yeah.
screen.
But I think it
That's
works
all that
within the
comes to my
movie,
mind.
you know? I don't think it subtracts from it knowing how it was done,
I
you
think
know?
it adds
No,
to it. To be honest, I think it adds to it because, like, I can see where Michael's coming from, where it's like this is all I can like when I see this scene,
yeah.
this is all I think of is the behind the scenes. But I
Which
think it really adds to it. It's a testament to how, you know, great these actors are, that they can see, you know, blue all around them and then imagine
yeah.
this world and try to, you know, act within it.
Yeah.
You know?
It doesn't like I don't know I forgot what I was gonna say. Never mind.
Yeah. One thing I forgot to mention in the last review is we found out that Anakin Skywalker made C-3PO, and we see him again in this movie. And
It's got an upgrade.
so obviously he knows who Anakin Skywalker is,
Mhm.
and people say this creates like a continuity problem in
No.
the
They
original
addressed that in the
trilogy.
next one.
But obviously his memory was wiped in the later
Yeah.
films. So
Yeah.
They make a point to show that.
I feel like that's not a continuity error. You
No.
know.
Yeah, it's good to point that out too, because not a lot of people know that. But yeah, C-3PO, his memory is wiped.
Yeah, and if you
So,
notice in this one, they don't talk about the metachlorians that were mentioned in the last film.
And Jar Jar is he's in it,
lot,
but much
no,
less.
yeah, much less. I mean, they try to take everything from the previous film that people hated. They tried to dull that down, but then new issues arise.
Yeah, they just push him off into the background. They're just like, okay, have
Well,
him
he
show up
did
in the
have an
beginning
important.
and address that he's here, but he's got to go somewhere else. You know?
Although in this film, like I said,
Yeah,
Jar Jar has that pivotal moment where he suggests to the whole Senate about giving Palpatine emergency power.
which
So it is,
Palpatine kind of planted on him, being like,
yeah, yeah.
"Oh yeah,
But
yeah, you cut
that's
off."
like it's important and it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
pivotal in the whole Clone Wars.
Yeah. Another reason that I wanted to bring up the metachlorians again, and I said a little bit about it before we started our discussion again, and the my point that I wanted to make last time that I blanked on was that uh, George Lucas likes to pay homages to his favorite films and stuff. And in the old Universal films, it was later on in the Frankenstein series where there was a whole scene where Larry Talbot, the Wolfman, he's being interrogated by all these police officers, and they bring in a psychologist to explain his his werewolfism and how it actually happens. And that was a big deal at the time because it got a lot of people pissed off about the idea that you're giving a reason why this whole supernatural thing happens, and that's the way it should remain, supernatural. So obviously, fans, modern day fans of Star Wars, were getting a little pissed off at the idea that you're giving a scientific reason for a supernatural power or
Yeah,
ability, you know.
yeah,
But I think that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to pay homage to one of his earlier, one of his favorite films. So
yeah.
I think that's what he was doing.
That's a really interesting point too, because we see that a lot nowadays. Is they're trying to add science into fantasy, genres, and I mean, you can see that with the Marvel films. They try to add science into stuff that you can't really explain with science. Like you can try, but that's not the idea. And that's not what people really, at least me personally, that's not really what I enjoy about it. I like the idea that it's a mystery and you don't really understand it. And sometimes it doesn't really make sense, but you just go with it. That's just the nature
Yeah.
of these kind of films.
Yeah. And it seemed like we were in kind of a consensus that it kind of explains like the power differentials in each person that has the force.
Yeah.
And it adds to that whole idea that certain people have stronger force abilities than others, you know. So I
And
don't think it
that's,
subtracts
yeah.
at all from the Star Wars universe. I think it's not an addition that everyone loves, but I think it works within the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, I totally agree. It gives some sort of power level aspect to it and really fleshes out the idea that, Anakin is the chosen one, so he should be stronger.
What? So yeah, I don't think that was a necessary addition, him being the chosen one. But again,
Yeah.
it's one of those things.
But
At the end of the day, it doesn't ruin anything
yeah,
Yeah, I think that
because
was
it just kind of comes out of nowhere. Like they don't even say what the prophecy is. They're just
they
like
don't.
they're like, oh, like how do we know he is? Like I think they should have at least just said it. That kind of also bothers me because in the next movie they're like, well, we could have misread it. It's like, well, what is there to misread?
Yeah.
Because kind of all we know is there's a guy who'll bring balance to the force.
And this is the one thing, we'll talk about this in the next film. This is the one thing that really confuses me, right? And people have mentioned this all over the internet. How on earth is destroying the other half of the force bringing balance to it? If anything, he did fulfill the prophecy when he wiped out the Jedi.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It balanced the force.
Yeah.
There's a lot less good and it's equal now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I mean, you could argue that he fulfilled the prophecy and he is the chosen one.
Well,
That whole misread aspect, and we'll go into that later. Maybe that's what they meant. You know what I mean? it was misread because there can't be that much. That's not balance.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the original films were very much tied to, I think it was John Campbell's book on the hero myth. And so there is always a chosen one in certain storylines. So I think George Lucas was trying to stick to this whole religious and mythological idea of a chosen one, and
Yeah,
Darth Vader or Anakin Skywalker is that chosen one.
yeah,
So
I would have just liked a little bit more explanation on where this prophecy came from, what it is.
yeah.
You know,
That's one
maybe
thing in canon is they don't really explain too well.
it's really just he's the chosen one. Well, why?
Yeah,
I mean,
Just this.
honestly, I don't think it was necessary to have the whole immaculate conception thing where his mother was a virgin and gives birth to him.
I don't have a problem with that because
I
then
think
it's just
it's
like he's kind of. It adds to.
yeah. It adds
he's-
to how special. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's interesting.
I think
He's
Justin
like the
actually,
Star Wars Jesus. I don't know.
yeah, I think Justin actually told me a while back that how he was actually born and that the Force brought him into existence. I think that was
Yeah,
the idea.
there's a couple of they've changed it again just because it's really weird. So I haven't kept up. First, it was Plagueis
Yeah.
who implanted. That was in Legends, and then Palpatine
Mhm.
more recently in canon, and I think they're retconning it again just because of the fact that they made Rey a Palpatine, so that kind of adds this weird like incest with her and Ben. So I'm not sure. So as of my recent knowledge in the Star Wars canon comics, Palpatine impregnated um,
Shmi.
Shmi Skywalker through the living force, not like actual intercourse, but like through the living force. Like he
He
created
manipulated
Anakin.
things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So basically, that's the idea behind it. So it's kind of like Anakin's his son in a way,
Yeah.
which is kind of why they have that relationship, and they try to build it more in this movie. The relationship between Palpatine and Anakin.
Yeah. We don't have much time left, so I just want to get your general thoughts on the clones in this movie and seeing the stormtroopers from the later films and see their origins and
Right.
everything. So I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It makes a lot of sense that they'd be similar, not identical, to a stormtrooper armor-wise.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Cool design. I actually like the dolphin film design, the Phase 1. I
A
like
lot of people hate on it.
I like Phase 2 as well. A lot of people do hate on it. You're right, Michael, and I'm one of the fans of it, to be honest,
too.
because it's actually a mix. I think the whole idea behind it was they have an homage to the Mandalorian, you know,
Right.
because
Because
of
it's based.
Django.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's Django. It's based on him, so they have the similar visor and all that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
But they're interesting. They're an interesting addition. And I guess the only feasible way they really could deal with a droid army is
Yeah.
a clone army without them making another droid army. You know what I mean?
Yeah, one is organic and then the other one is mechanical. So I think that's kind of the whole idea about it.
Yeah.
Because, I mean,
But at the end of the day, they're both kind of controlled. You know, they
Yeah,
don't really
they're
have a
both-
lot of free will.
Yeah, they're both.
but that's the good
programs
part of
per
having
se.
Yeah.
clones. I mean, there's a commentary there of having a whole clone army and not giving them their free will to choose whether to fight or not. But I think that if you were going to fight a war against a bunch of droids and stuff, I think that's the only way you could fight this war is with a whole organic army bred from just one
And some
person.
people might say like, "Oh, well, this army is suspicious. Why did they use them?" You know, they were forced to because a lot of Jedi were about to die. A war was about to start. There was no army. They
Yeah.
had to use this army. So
Yeah.
For sure.
All right, guys. So I want to conclude this discussion, and we'll move on to Revenge of the Sith, which is probably by far one of the best prequels of this whole series. And just maybe I can get your last second thoughts on this film. Um, like,
Solid 6 out of 10. I would recommend it to a Star Wars fan or someone who is interested in Star Wars. Other than that, I mean, don't watch this film based on pure curiosity,
yeah,
because it's not an enjoyable film. I mean, it's enjoyable in the fact that it's Star Wars. I love Star Wars, but it's not one I look forward to watch when I watch, the Skywalker saga. It's the one that's like, all right, let's get through this.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a meme at this point, just
Yeah.
how cringy it is.
last thought, Michael. Only 1 minute.
Pretty much the same as what he said. Last time I watched all the movies, this movie stopped about 30 minutes through, and I couldn't pick up where I left off, so I just skipped it because I couldn't add on that extra time. I don't enjoy it.
Yeah. To piggyback on what Justin said, I would recommend it to a Star Wars fan for the extended lore, but besides that, just stay away if you're not a fan. All right, so let's move on to our next discussion.